Hello, you are listening to the Guillotine, and this is your host, Mike Gagnon. And today I'm going to talk about what's going on in the States with Charlie Kirk and everything, the recent fallout. It seems like American media is falling apart over this right now. So up front, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that Charlie Kirk said. I also don't agree with assassinating someone who is exercising their freedom of speech. But I think we need to be able to talk about it. And the fact that the party in power in the United States is trying so hard to prevent people from discussing it at all is very concerning. And I say that because, look, let's talk facts. Facts are facts, and facts are Charlie Kirk was on record as saying some very hateful and intolerant things like I said that I would not agree with, things that were deeply bigoted. That's not subjective. He said things like he wouldn't fly on a plane that had a black pilot. That he didn't believe in gay and trans rights, and that is something that I know he's not the only person that feels that way, but it's a very disgusting part of the human condition, and there's a lot of people that think that way, and it's very sad. Here's the thing: anyone that's preaching hate is not the good guy. Anyone that's preaching hate should not be leading, should not be someone that you're looking up to and following. The idea that you have rights and someone else doesn't because they're different than you is incredibly problematic. We're all people. We're all human beings. When people talk about equality and people argue, pundits argue about, well, what they really mean is they want preferential treatment, or they want equality, but they also want special treatment at the same time, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm saying at the basic level, you're a living, breathing human being. We should all have the same set of rights, and that our right to exist should be respected. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with what anyone else says, but you can't force them to be like you, be the way they want, or change themselves according to what you think, especially when in most cases these are strangers. You don't even know these people. Now, if I can stay on the subject for a minute, I have Ground News up here. It is not a sponsor. I don't have any sponsors because I don't want anybody trying to influence what I say or censor what I'm doing. Now, I know I'm a few days back, and I was hoping there'd be something a little bit older on here from when Charlie Kirk's assassination first happened, but you're gonna have to bear with me and roll with it here, because I will get to some points that we can analyze here on Ground News. So here's the deal. There is no condoning the public execution of someone, regardless of what they're saying. However, I do think if you take a moment to think about the perspective of a person in the world right now who is different than the majority. I hesitate to say the norm or even the majority, because I have met a lot of people and I know there are a lot of different shades, and I don't really know that normal exists, or that there's even a majority. Really, when it comes down to it, I think there's a lot more shades and a lot more nuance and complexity to people and personalities than what we take from news bites. Anyway, I'm not even sure about the accuracy of the news reported on the assassin, because at one point they were saying that the assassin was trans or in transition, then they weren't. They were maybe gay, or the roommate was gay or trans, or so they've really sidestepped a lot of the description of this assassin. And I don't recall his name, and I'm not going to look it up. You've got fingers in a brain, you can find it. And again, anything that you think I'm misreporting or you disagree with, you've got access to the internet. You can use your own fingers and your own brain and look up what I'm doing or saying or whatever you disagree with. But here's the thing. Let's say he was trans and he's at a rally of Charlie Kirk's, a public speaking engagement. How would you feel being that person in that minority, listening to someone talk about how you should not be allowed to exist? I think it is more than reasonable for that person to feel threatened and endangered, and to feel as if that person is trying to create a world and a society where your safety is in question and that you may be hunted down and persecuted for your differences. And I don't think that's something that we want anywhere in North America, and especially America that calls itself the greatest country in the world. So proud of their freedoms and their freedom of speech, and yet they've watched this administration claw back their freedoms and their rights consistently, almost on a daily basis since the second term of Trump started. And I'm in Canada, FYI, and we've got our own problems here, and I know, and I'll talk about those in the future, and we definitely have some spillover. It's a slightly different perspective, but there's definitely some spillover from some of the hate that's happening in the States right now, and the tacit complicity or apathy to some of the horrible things being done and said. That being said, as I was saying, if someone was in that audience and was trans or gay, you have to expect that they would feel as if this person was creating a movement, stirring a mob that would eventually endanger and persecute them. Now I want you to think, what if the person in the audience was black and this was a Klan rally? That's obvious. They would feel threatened. They would feel endangered. They would feel like this person is trying to build up a groundswell of anti-them sentiment, for lack of a better term. And, imagine if this person was an immigrant, someone from the Middle East, and this person was preaching anti-Islamic, anti-Muslim, name your Middle Eastern religion, there's a few. Again, you would feel like the world you lived in and the country you lived in, the society that you were a part of, was about to turn on you. And I think you can't blame the shooter for feeling as if their life is in danger. You can blame them for the shooting. You can blame them for how they handled it instead of becoming active and speaking their voice and standing up. But you can't blame people for being fearful when you have groups of people who are promoting hate and sowing dissent in the population. And I don't think that's by mistake. I don't think it's accident. I think it's intentional. I think it's planned. And I think we're watching not just the media, but the political landscape of the United States crumbling right now. Now, take a look at what else has happened. Now, the fact that J.D. Vance took over this guy's podcast and has been repeatedly saying, my friend Charlie Kirk, and I'm taking over for Charlie Kirk, and he was my friend. That is such a conflict of interest. That is such something that I don't think ever seen before in this way, in that you're publicly supporting someone who has preached removing the rights of a large percentage of the people you're supposed to represent, and a lot of hate, a lot of racism. Again, I mean, it's not as if he was unclear about his feelings. And the ultimate irony is that they're now using his assassination as an excuse to remove other people's freedom of speech when he himself, Charlie Kirk, would have supported freedom of speech. I'm not going to say he would support those who disagreed with him, but he did claim to hold the right to freedom of speech very dearly to him. So the fact that they're using him as an excuse to take away others' freedom of speech is just a very strange irony. And what a conflict of interest when you've got the Vice President of America extolling the virtues of his friend who hated black people and gay people. So strange. I've always thought it was barbaric that this is an issue that we are still discussing throughout the entirety of my life. I am not a member of the LGBTQ community, but I have no problem with them having rights or living their life however they want. It doesn't matter to me. I don't understand why it matters to anyone else. Buddy down the street wants to wear a dress or become a woman or sleep with a man. It has nothing to do with me. I don't care. Do what you want. They're not hurting anyone. And if you want to make the religious argument that they're hurting themselves or their souls, here's the problem with that, is that you can't use your religion as the basis for forcing people to live a certain way or assume that your religion and the law are the same thing, because they're not. And you can't just say, well, I believe in God or Jesus and my interpretation of that, because there's plenty of interpretations, and if you really want to follow that scripture, there's supposed to be tolerance for everyone, tolerance and love for everyone. But it seems like there's a lot of people, particularly in the United States and yes, in Canada, who just want to use that as an excuse to hate and try and limit people and take away their rights because you wouldn't do it. No one's making you do it. Just because someone else wants to transition, change their gender, or be in a gay relationship, it's not hurting you, it's not affecting you, and you can't try and claim that you're a religious warrior trying to save their soul. That should give you the right to force them or persecute them to do something differently. No, you don't have to agree, but that doesn't give you the right to try and make their lives miserable, to remove their rights, to hunt them down or force them to change. It doesn't work. That's not how things work. And then we've got the fallout of this. And since I didn't have any of the older articles here, let's see if I can get some stuff on Kimmel. There we go. So if you haven't seen the surprise appearance of Jon Stewart on The Daily Show in response to Kimmel, it's a great bit of satire. They're mentioning it here. They did an entire episode where they were essentially acting like they were state-run media. And I mean, that's what it's coming down to in the States right now. And this is ridiculous. The idea that Kimmel gets pulled, if he had actually said something incredibly offensive, if he had condoned the murder of Charlie Kirk, if he had done any number of things, then myself included, the public opinion would probably be on their side. But the fact that his comments were actually quite reserved and almost for lack of a better term, censored already. I mean, what he said, and you can look this up again, it's hard enough to try and find quotes real time while I'm doing this, so you'll have to be patient with me. But paraphrasing slightly, he said, don't try and make us think that this wasn't a gun nut that had some sort of right-leaning beliefs, that it was, some crazy liberal went and shot him. And the crux of his quote was that the Republicans were using his assassination to try and score political points and push their own agendas forward. And you can't argue with that. That's true. We can see that daily on TV, on the internet, on YouTube. Like, you can see it. It's obvious. They're not hiding it. And Kimmel getting pulled off of TV because he pointed it out. He didn't swear. He didn't condone murder. He wasn't talking about anything other than the fact that a lot of politicians, especially on the right now, are using Charlie Kirk's assassination as an excuse to force censorship. The quotes from the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, if you look it up, how offended he is and how this is a deserved suspension, that's crazy. It's crazy. You cannot look at his comments and say that they are not biased and politically motivated. They are absolutely awful. And Nexstar, the parent company, who obviously, as we all already know now, did this for the same reasons that Colbert was canceled, because these giant media companies are trying to merge and they need approval from the FCC, and so they're kissing the FCC's ass because they follow whatever the president wants right now. And it's so disgusting. It's all about money, it's all about greed, and it's all about letting these companies build media monopolies that control the news and what we're allowed to see and hear on TV. And I don't think a lot of people on the right that are supporting this action right now understand that this is the beginning of mass media censorship. And it's not going to be very long before it starts to affect something that you enjoy and you like. Right now, it might not be something, if you're not a Kimmel fan, you're like, yay, Kimmel's gone. But it's only a matter of time before something else that you enjoy, whether it's a news commentary show, whether it's a documentary series or a historical series or a totally innocuous fictional series that you like to relax and enjoy at night, after work, or with the family, it's going to be affected. And this is not the direction anyone should want to see things going. Right now, the United States is the closest that any civilization in modern history has been to 1930s Germany ever. And I don't think that's hyperbole. Look, do some research. You can go on the internet. You can try Wikipedia. You can go to, you know what? Don't even trust the internet if you don't want to. If you want to argue about that, there's plenty of encyclopedias that still exist. I grew up with a set of them in my house. And just read about World War II. Read about Hitler. Read about World War I and the fallout and how the fascist movement started there. It's the exact same playbook. They're taking the same actions. They're censoring the same types of people. And they're working towards a dictatorship. And they're not even hiding it anymore. And they've got so much support because there's so many of these people have infiltrated the system. People don't want to believe it. They've become so complacent, and they've believed the rhetoric about America being the greatest country for so long that they don't believe it can happen, and they're watching it happen, and they're just thinking, no, this is going to stop, this is going to change tomorrow, or this is going to change soon, and it's not without action. And it's scary to see. And I mentioned there earlier, like Colbert being canceled, and of course the president of the US is very supportive of that, and he said Kimmel is next, and oh, there you go, Kimmel's next. Now he's saying Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon are next. And I mean, I feel like Fallon isn't even really in this fight, and not until at least recently anyway. His content used to be a lot less edgy than it is now. He didn't push the boundaries like a lot of the other comedians, and he did kind of play it safe for a long time. And now I feel like he's been thrown into this and forced to become a warrior for free speech and comedy. Remember when there was the right saying that comedy was being restricted and because of wokeness, which again is a ridiculous concept. I don't know that anyone can explain to me exactly what woke is. I'm not talking about woke, I'm talking about human rights. Anyway, and then even as far as, let's see if they have anything on the ground news for this. Yeah. So, DC Comics, you guys know comics are close to my heart if you know me or if you follow any of my other content or if you're familiar with my other work as a comic creator. Um, DC was launching a new Red Hood comic book series. Red Hood is a spinoff of Batman, if you're not familiar. Somebody who was a former Robin became a character called the Red Hood. He's kind of a darker, grittier, more violent version of Batman. And the new series just came out, and the author, Gretchen Felker happens to be a trans person, which is absolutely fine. If I remember, or if I understand correctly, I believe it that she is a male transitioning to a female, or has. It's really besides the point. It shouldn't matter, and it doesn't really matter. But she made a comment, and again, you don't have to agree with her sentiment, but the reaction of DC Comics is just over the top. So here's what she said on September 10th. Thoughts and prayers, you Nazi bitch. Hope the bullet's okay after touching Charlie Kirk. All right? So it's not the nicest comment. It's not the most empathetic comment. It's not out of bounds. It's not any worse than anything Charlie Kirk ever said or has said about similar situations in the past. If you pour through his social media history, these are the kinds of jabs that go back and forth on social media all the time. This was not an official DC Comics social media account. She did not claim to be presenting the thoughts and opinions of DC Comics. It was her own personal social media account that she posted this on. And in response, when DC Comics found out, they didn't just fire her. They canceled the series. They canceled the release of the next two issues that were already ready to go, issues 2 and 3. And they've issued refunds to the stores that bought the comics. In fact, let me pull this back up and I'll read it because I'm probably getting a few details incorrectly here because it's been a couple days since I read this. So DC Comics cancels Red Hood over author's Charlie Kirk posts. Publisher drops Gretchen Felker Martin's Batman spinoff after she posted inflammatory comments about the conservative activist shooting. On the same day the new Batman-inspired Red Hood comic book series hit stores, DC Comics announced it was canceling all future issues, citing writer Gretchen Felker Martin's social media posts about the shooting of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk. I also want to point out, too, the subject matter of the comic series has nothing to do with politics or Charlie Kirk or anything like that. So again, why they feel the reaction is necessary that they took, I'm not sure. I think it's very, in the grander scheme of things, innocuous. Her comments made no difference if you really want to be objective about it. On September 10th, Felker Martin, who is transgender, had posted on her now deactivated Blue Sky account, "Thoughts and prayers, you Nazi bitch," and "Hope the bullet's okay after touching Charlie Kirk." Felker Martin's hostility toward Kirk stemmed from his vocal opposition to transgender rights and gender-affirming care, his claims that transgender identity is a social contagion, mental delusion, and lie, and his calls for conservatives on college campuses to report professors promoting so-called gender ideology, according to the New York Times. So again, if this had been a person that was from Somalia and someone was preaching anti-immigration or anti-Somali sentiment, would they have made such a big deal? Would they have made the same choice? Or what if it was anti-Israeli? I mean, take any minority and put it in this place, and I feel like somehow they've decided that transgender people, gay people, are still okay to punish in an over-the-top way as compared to a different segment of population or a minority. Kirk's death and Felker Martin's post coincided with the September 10th release of the first issue of the new Red Hood series, which she was slated to author through December 2026. So this woman lost her job. She had a year's worth of work, which I know how important is in the comic industry because everything is freelance contract, and the fact that she got a gig for over a year on the same series is really good. Clearly her previous work must have performed well. Billed as DC's first in-universe title for readers 17 and older, the series was set to follow Jason Todd, the Red Hood, former Robin turned anti-hero, and Helena Bertinelli, the Huntress, as they relocate to Louisiana and face new threats. As of September 10th, retailers had ordered 3 issues, with the next 2 scheduled for October 2nd and November 12th. According to Popverse, DC Comics is not only canceling all future issues, but also offering retailers credit for the first issue orders. That's what I was talking about. So they're going to get refunded for those copies that have already been bought. And I know people have already bought them, and people who are selling them online for crazy money now. Because guess what? That comic book is worth a lot more now. All of a sudden, because of this nonsense. Even for copies already sold to customers. At DC Comics, we place the highest value on our creators and community and affirm the right to peaceful individual expression of personal viewpoints, the company said in a statement, which, again, is contradictory to the action that they took, in my opinion, quite honestly. And in the last couple of years, DC Comics has made a couple of interesting legal steps that I definitely disagree with. Posts or public comments that can be viewed as promoting hostility or violence are inconsistent with DC's standards of conduct, which is fine if it's on their website or on their social media, but not if it's an employee in their own personal ones. And when I say employee, that's a loose term. They're not a real employee. They're a contract freelancer. They get paid a flat rate per page. They're not guaranteed work. They should not have the kind of power that they are exercising over this person. Unnamed sources told the Hollywood Reporter that Felker Martin's posts about Kirk were not the only reason for her firing, but the final straw that broke the camel's back. I'm skeptical about that. Why would they sign her for a 1.5-year contract on a new series that she gets to run? Sorry for the interruption. So, again, why would they have signed her to a long-term contract, more than a year? That is not something that a new artist and writer ever gets. It's not something that hasn't proven themselves in the industry gets handed to them. That's not a thing. So the idea that somehow she was on thin ice, it doesn't carry a lot of weight, in my opinion. I think that's an excuse. The company said in the statement, posts or public comments that can be viewed as promoting hostility or violence are inconsistent. Okay, I already got past there. Okay, the final straw that broke the camel's back. The Comics Journal reported she had previously been criticized for calling Israel's government fascist, comparing Zionism to full-fledged Nazism, and making off-color jokes, including the World Trade Center attacks as the most principled and defensible thing Osama bin Laden ever did. So she was known for making comments like this online. So again, the comments about Charlie Kirk actually don't even seem to really exceed what she's done before. And again, if you believe in freedom of speech, you don't have to agree with what they say, but you would ideally agree with the right to say it. All of these people, that Charlie Kirk himself enjoyed his freedom of speech that allowed him to preach hate. Personally, I don't think hate speech should be covered by freedom of speech anywhere, but I don't make the laws. This whole situation, though, I feel is so over the top in the reaction from DC Comics. And again, as I mentioned, they've been making some decisions over the last few years with creators that I think, well, I know I don't agree with, but I think are a little bit misplaced. I've got an article about why they need to lose their legal battle with the creator of Fables that you can look up on the website. Anyway, so, and I mean, I think a lot of people know right now the stuff going on in Israel is also, with Israel and Gaza, I should say, or Israel and Palestine. You know, there's a lot of mixed opinions, and a lot of people don't support the war over there. And you can't blame them when they're talking about just literally committing a genocide on a population. Anti-transgender activists also seized on a scene in Felker Martin's novel Manhunt, reportedly being adapted for TV by trans director Lily Wachowski, in which J.K. Rowling dies when her castle catches fire and collapses. Um, I mean, that's just funny. That's humor. That's postmodern humor, and no one is actually celebrating a real death there. We need to really get back to recognizing reality versus fiction. And that is the lines have been blurred so badly there. And again, I think that's intentional. I think this is the culmination of a long-term plan relating to censorship and human rights that has been going on for a long time, especially in the United States. So Felker Martin told the Comics Journal that despite backlash over her past comments, none of those issues were raised when DC editor Ariano Turturro, who is also transgender, first discussed the Red Hood project with her. We had a conversation about it, and I told them, as soon as you hire me, you're going to get between 5 and 100 of the craziest people you've ever met in your life screaming for my head and yours. Felker Martin said, DC placed no explicit limits on her public comments or social media, and that's another thing too, is new contracts might have some of these limitations in them, but if this one didn't, then what right did they have to take that action? Again, not an hourly employee, not clocking into an office, not representing the company. A company spokesperson countered that all creators receive written guidelines on social media use, a point confirmed by 2 other DC creators who are not quoted, and I don't blame them. After her Red Hood announcement, Felker Martin said she was targeted by the far-right Comicsgate movement, which opposes diversity in comics, including hiring creators from racial, sexual, and gender minorities. She also faced criticism from pro-Israel outlets over her comments on Israel's military actions in Gaza, which some critics say amount to ethnic cleansing, following Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attack on Israeli civilians. So I'm not going to continue to read this. You can find that on your own. This particular article is from Metro Weekly, and you can do the same thing I did and go to Ground News if you want, or somewhere else. I'm not promoting them. Excuse me. I'm not promoting them. They're not a sponsor. It's just an easy way to illustrate my point. The thing is, though, is this whole situation is way overblown. And yes, it's horrible. No one should be publicly executed for their opinions while they're speaking in public or for any reason. However, using that as a tool and a weapon to remove others' rights of free speech or to even discuss the topic. And this is the most egregious example has got to be the Kimmel thing. Kimmel never said anything in support of it. Kimmel never said anything that could be construed as hate. What he said was that the right was using it, the conservatives, or I should say the Republicans in the United States, some of them were using it to get their own agendas pushed forward and to limit the free speech of others, which is true. It's not an if, it's not a maybe. They absolutely have been disingenuous about their representation of the story, about their discussion and representation of details about the shooter. They've absolutely been dishonest about it and tried to use that to push their own political agenda. And the fact that he was just penalized for saying that out loud, for saying it was obvious and we could all see it happening in front of us, is crazy. And I think it speaks very poorly for the future of society in the United States, and overall makes me fearful about being in North America. As I said, I'm in Canada, and we also have some issues too, and there's definitely some spillover from the issues going on in the States. I'm sure I'll be discussing some of that again in the future, but for now, I'm going to leave it at that, and hopefully this has been some sort of a succinct coverage of the fact that the fallout, the third party, the tertiary fallout from this Charlie Kirk assassination is ridiculous. And I mean, if you want to focus on the shooter, if you want to focus on the case, if you want to focus on the crime, if you want to focus on the charges that should be laid against the shooter, that's fine. But how do you do that when your media is not even allowed to talk about it, not allowed to talk about the facts that are happening right in front of their face. Seems a little bit crazy to me, and I'll leave you with that.